Good morning, y'all. I'm going to address something that's pretty prevalent, at least in my circles. I won't speak for everybody, but I will speak for myself. So I was on Facebook this morning, of course, and I came across a status that was shared that basically said, I don't care how much scripture you quote, how do you treat people? And at first glance, like a lot of the stuff that's put on Facebook, it seems quotable, shareable, as many people share it and co-sign on it. But let's go ahead and let's stop, pause for a moment, slow down, and think about that statement. Because the first thing that was said is, I don't care how much scripture you quote. It doesn't matter how you feel about the person that's quoting the scripture. To start off a statement with, I don't care how much scripture you quote, is a red flag. And it points out the fact and gives excuse to disrespect and devalue scripture. And I see this a lot. I see this a lot from the pulpit. I see this a lot in the midst of the saints on Facebook and in real life, where we don't value scripture. And, one of the greatest I guess one of the greatest offenses or defenses of the statement or the mindset of not valuing scripture is from who it comes from. Because a lot of times the people who quote the most scripture are the most self-righteous, or the people that quote the most scripture are the most zealous, or the most mean, are the most unloving. And so, you got a point, because, if you got people that's quoting scriptures and they know the Bible back to front, but then their life look like hell, or they can't even showcase love, you feel like, I don't care what you have to say. I'm not going to listen to what you have to say because of the way you're saying it, and because look at your life, and, you don't seem to be influenced by the stuff that you quote. And so people are like, I don't care. You got to be very careful when you say you don't care how much scripture somebody quotes, because that doesn't have anything to do with that person. That has everything to do with you. It has everything to do with your own devaluation or lack of respect for scripture. And it really gives the person that agrees with this statement and that shares this statement and this sentiment, it gives you an excuse to just not be held accountable to scripture, because obviously if the one that's quoting the scripture doesn't even have a love walk or what you deem as acceptable of enough as of a walk for you to listen to, you're not going to listen to. There's a scripture in the Bible, it's in Matthew 23, where Jesus says, observe everything that the Pharisees and the Sadducees say, but don't do what they do. And in essence, what he was saying is, the Pharisees and the Sadducees, the religious leaders, they sit in the seat of Moses. So they have a certain kind of authority to tell you directives to obey that you do need to obey. So Jesus is just like, hey, you guys do need to obey the directives that these people in these offices are telling you to do. But what I want you to do is be very noticeable or cognizant or realize what they do, and don't do that. So he's saying, yeah, I know what they're saying, listen to what they're saying, but don't follow the hypocrisy. So that he's saying, do what they say, don't follow the hypocrisy. So what that says is, we have a responsibility to listen to those who do quote scripture that we may not necessarily like, because they may be mean as spit. They might not have the life that you deem is a nice life, or that anybody else would deem as a nice life. But just because somebody treats other people wrong does not in any stretch of the imagination mean that we should disrespect and devalue scripture. Because at that case, when you get to that point, what you're doing is works-based righteousness. Oh, they're not worthy enough to quote scripture. You don't have to listen to anything they say because of their works. Well, let me ask you a question. Since when did you deem yourself perfect enough compared to God to make that kind of judgment? A lot of people, when they make judgments about certain things, they're comparing themselves against the next person instead of comparing themselves against God. Because at the end of the day, you're not listening to a valuable scripture that's quoted out of the mouth of somebody that's mean-spirited or of a religious spirit. That's not helping you out. At the end of the day, you got a relationship between you and God. And so you need to respect scripture. You need to value scripture. We need to respect and we need to value scripture more in church, especially the black church, because there's just like a whole lot of faulty teaching. Oh, I don't care what you got to say. People don't care about what you have to say until they know that you care. And that's true. However, we have to bring our minds up to a higher place as believers in God. We shouldn't have a respecter of persons. That means that you shouldn't respect your favorite preacher that does everything in your eyes is right more than the one that doesn't. You shouldn't respect the preacher that appears to have it all together more than somebody who says something, some scripture out of their mouth that may not have it all together and that may be mean and it may be just purely religious. What I'm getting at is the fact that no matter who the vessel is, you got to respect the scripture. So you can feel whatever way you want to feel about the person that's quoting the scripture. Feel whatever way you want to feel. You may be justified in that. But you don't lead off a statement saying, I don't care about the scripture that they quote because of how they are. It's works-based righteousness. I've heard statements in the past like, you shouldn't be saying a lot or talking about giving and talking against tithe and worship or tithe and offering. You shouldn't be saying certain statements. You shouldn't be saying how the church should do this and do that because I'll pull up my tithe records and I'll measure them against yours. That's works-based righteousness. The gospel of Jesus Christ isn't about the works that make us look good. It's about the work of Jesus Christ. So anytime, be very observant and beware of works-based comparisons. People that want to compare their tithe records against this person because this person says what the church should be and apparently they don't give. That's of no consequence to what they're saying. And for you to pull up your good works and try to compare them, especially as a pastor and a leader, that's disgusting. Let me read this comment. Yep, some Christians tend to be more judgmental than a non-believer. They do. And you know why? Because a lot of times, Natasha, what I've been one, I'll be the first one to say that I've been the one to be in that category because we're comparing ourselves against the next person. I remember, and this is something that I can say that, it has its, I'm susceptible and I have to watch myself because I could sling back into that again. But there are people, coming up, I was so intent on pointing out what people weren't doing. And I remember a guy asked me one day, he was just like, do you actually want to see these people change? Or are you getting a kick out of just judging them? What it is the reason why some Christians appear more judgmental than non-believers is because they think they got it all together. They think they got it right. They think that they're acceptable in God because of what they have done. They have totally missed and forgotten what brought them into the grace of God was God. They think that they earned it. And the truth about the matter is we didn't. So as I close and in the last 30 seconds of this video, beware of works-based righteousness. Respect and value scripture no matter who it comes from, because you have no right and you have no platform and you have no footing on which to stand to judge the person that's being religious. You don't. You don't have no right, you don't have no footing to stand on to judge the next person and say, I'm not going to respect anything. I don't care what you have to say out of your mouth. I don't care what you have to say because you treat people bad. So, okay, so because they treat people bad and because the next person treats people good, you're going to listen to that person who might be saying the same exact thing, and you think that it's justified, and you think that you can make that judgment because somehow even if you're not comparing yourself, and I know this is way more than 30 seconds because I got to just get it out. Even though you're not comparing yourself against the next person, to compare and pit one pastor that's a good pastor against a pastor that is not so good and that you don't like, that's flawed. That's flawed. There's a whole bunch of things that my leadership does that I don't quite rock with. However, I listen to their messages. I still go to the church. People have said, oh, you should start a church if you know everything, right? That's not the point. The point is, no matter how much I don't agree with you on really not even what you say from the pulpit, but just like, you know, the character flaws, no matter what your character flaws are, I know how to respect and I know how to honor the word coming out of somebody's mouth. Let me pause again. Compare to God and we will always have something to change. Absolutely. Because we're not God. We should always be comparing ourselves to God and not others. Should always be comparing ourselves to God and not others. But like I said, it don't matter how much I don't like the character flaws or if I see anything, you know, prideful or whatever coming from my leadership, I still can identify the truth of the gospel when it's spoken. I still can identify when they're speaking something that's right. So I'm not telling anybody to do what I don't myself do. But I think that it's a grave mistake. It's a grave mistake to say that you don't respect scripture because it's coming out of a vessel that you don't really rock with like that. And it's an excuse. It's very much an excuse. And it gives you the latitude to not take into consideration what's being said because of the vessel that it's come from. And at the end of the day, when you get into heaven and when you get into the presence of God, you're going to be judged for that. You're going to be judged for being a respecter of persons, and you're going to be judged for not having an ear to hear what God was likely saying to you through that vessel. You can't just pick and choose who you want to hear from. You have to be loyal to God more than you're loyal to man. And when you're loyal to God more than you're loyal to man, then all this other stuff that happens that talks about honor and all this stuff, it goes out the window. Because the whole thing about honor is I'm honoring God first. And I'll say it again. There's a lot of people in the past that have said that have made quotes about honor, and they forget that the only reason why people are honoring you as the leader in the church setting and in the church world is because they're honoring God first. They're honoring God through you, even through people that don't necessarily do things right. If we call the honor the office of the presidency, we call the honor offices in church. So a lot of times, I don't think leaders take into account the fact that you may be crap as a leader. You may have character flaws that you don't address. You may be prideful, self-centered, not listening to people, whatever the case may be. That may be you. But because of your position, people like me have the responsibility to honor you because we honor God. We're not just honoring you just because we're honoring you. God owns all the dishes, even the chipped ones. Absolutely. Absolutely, God owns all of the dishes, Dr. Andre, even the chipped one. And we can't be a respecter of persons. If God owns all of the dishes, then let's respect God by honoring his dishes and let him sort out the details. But it's not up to us to make a judgment and say, well, I'm not going to listen to that person because they suck. They're mean. They're religious. They don't even believe what they say out of their mouth. You can't do that. I don't even do that in my own life. I have things that I disagree with. I voice those things that I disagree with, and I continue to listen to the person, despite the fact that they might not necessarily think that I rock with them like that. But I've said a lot, and to continue, I'm just going to be repeating myself. pretty sure y'all can get a lot out of what I said, so I'm going to end it here. God bless y'all. Happy Saturday. Y'all have a great day. And, yeah, stay safe. All right.